The trees still dripped when the killing ended. Water fell from leaf to leaf in the dark, patient as beads slipping through a septon's fingers, though there had been little enough prayer in the whispering wood that night. The branches above were black with rain and moon shadow. The ground beneath them a torn slick of churned mud, dead horses, broken spear shafts, and the wreckage of men who had ridden hard and found steel waiting where they had expected sleep. Torches hissed in the wet. Somewhere a wounded man kept crying for his brother in a voice already gone hoarse. Somewhere else another man laughed, a sharp, unbelieving laugh that came after fear had spent itself and left a man standing when better men had fallen. Robb sat his horse very straight, though every muscle in him ached from the charge and from the hour before the charge, which had been worse. Waiting was always worse. Gray wind moved through the bodies with a ghost silence and a wolf's red certainty. Muzzle dark and steaming, tail low. Men made space for the direwolf whether they meant to or not. They made space for Robb as well, though half of them still stared at him as if they had not yet understood that the boy at the center of the ring of torchlight had been the blade that cut through the Kingslayer's camp. A pair of Mormon men dragged their prisoner forward by the arms. Jaime had lost his helm and one gauntlet, and his famous hair, bright even in mud, clung in damp strands to his brow and cheeks. There was blood on his face, though not much of it was his own. He had the look of a man pulled half out of a song and thrust into common weather, too handsome by torchlight, too alive, too insolent to kneel as any captive ought. Yet kneel he did, if only because the men holding him were too tired and too angry to let him stand. He lifted his head and looked first at Grey Wind, then at Robb. His mouth bent into the ghost of a smile. "So," Jaime said, "it was you." Robb found that his own breath still came hard. He had imagined this moment once or twice in the long nights since leaving Winterfell. Imagined a crowned lion brought low before him. Imagined triumph sharp enough to satisfy all the helpless fury he had carried south. The real thing felt colder. There were too many dead men for triumph. There were always too many dead men once swords were drawn. "It was," Robb said. Jaime's gaze flicked over the faces surrounding him. The shaggy northern beards, the hard riverlord eyes, the battered helms and cloaks dark with wet. "You hide well for a king's son." "I am not hiding now." "No." Jaime shifted in the grip of the men who held him. "Now you're making your first mistake. If you mean to kill me, boy, do it quickly. Men who wait too long for vengeance end by choking on it." Rickard Karstark came through the press of men before Robb could answer. The Lord's face looked as if it had been hacked from old bark and left out in the rain, but the rain could not soften it. Two men followed behind him bearing a litter, and on the litter lay what remained of Torhen and Eddard Stark, the sons Jaime had cut down trying to carve his way through the trap and reach the boy commander whose death might yet have turned the night. Their cloaks had been drawn up over their faces, but their boots showed beneath the cloth, mud-caked and still. Karstark did not look at Robb. He looked only at Jaime. "This one dies," he said. The words fell heavy. Men muttered in assent. One of the Riverlords spat. Grey Wind stood still as carved stone, his yellow eyes on the lion in the mud. Robb felt the shape of the moment as clearly as if someone had laid cold iron against the back of his neck. All at once he saw the night fork before him. In one path there was blood, clean and hot, and the savage satisfaction of it. In the other there was patience and uncertainty, and all the hard burdens patience demanded. The first path would cheer the men. The second would anger them. He could feel their hunger for a head. Jaime laughed softly under his breath. "There. No. Hear them? Best obey while they still love you." "No." Robb looked from the litter to Jaime and back again. He had met Lord Rickard's sons in the march south, had eaten with them, heard Torrhen's rough, booming laugh, seen Eddard clean his sword with more care than his face. Their deaths were no less real because they had died in victory. Victory did not close a man's eyes for him. "He lives," Robb said. Karstark's head turned slowly. "My sons do not." "No. Robb held the older man's gaze. It would have been easier if Karstark had shouted. The quiet was harder. And if Jaime dies tonight, Lord Tywin loses a son, and we lose the only coin dear enough to make him listen. You think lions listen? I think fathers count. For a heartbeat, Rickard Stark looked as though he might strike him then and there. Robb did not move. He could hear the men around him breathing. Then Stark's mouth flattened into something uglier than anger because it had disappointment in it. And disappointment from hard men could wound more deeply than rage. He lives, Rickard said, as if testing the taste of the words and finding poison in them. Then let him live bound hand and foot and watched by men who remember my boys. If he slips his leash, my lord, I will kill every guard between him and the gate and finish what your mercy began. He will not slip it, Robb said. Jaime's smile turned faintly curious. Mercy. Is that what this is? Robb ignored him. Sir Darren, he called to one of the Lannister men, take 10 and see him chained. 2 doors between him and the night. If he says he is thirsty, give him water. If he says he is cold, give him blankets. If he asks for a sword, laugh at him. No. A snort went through the gathered men, unwilling but real. Jaime rose because the hands under his arms forced him up. He moved with a swordsman's grace, even half captured, and he kept his eyes on Robb as he was taken away. I had thought your father raised sons, he said. Perhaps he raised a lord after all. Robb watched him disappear among helms and torch smoke. When he could no longer see the gleam of golden hair, he turned away and found Brynden Tully beside him. Rain on the old knight's beard, his expression unreadable. You did well, the Blackfish said. Stark would disagree. Stark buried sons tonight. Let him disagree. Lord Tywin will hear of this before dawn, and when he hears, he will know 2 things. First, that his son lives. Second, that the boy he meant to break has enough sense not to smash the hostage he's just won. Robb looked around at the wood, at the dark trunks and low mist, at the bodies his men were beginning to gather. I do not feel as if I've won anything. No, Brynden said. That is another reason you did well. By the time they reached Riverrun, the eastern sky had gone to iron. The castle rose from the joining of the rivers like something grown from the very stone, pale walls beaded with rain, towers jutting over the green-black waters, banners hanging wet and heavy in the dawn. Horns called from the battlements. Men shouted. A chain rattled, and a gate began to open. Edmure Tully rode out with laughter on his face and blood on his sleeve, as if he could not decide whether he was more brother or soldier at that moment. Robb dismounted before the gate. His legs felt borrowed. Catelyn came down the steps of the yard before the grooms could reach him, skirts muddied, hair loosened by wind and haste. And for one brief, dangerous instant, he was not a commander or a son of Winterfell, or a figure men watched. He was only a boy who had come through his first great battle alive, and had found his mother waiting. She touched his cheek, his shoulder, the back of his head. Quick searching touches to make certain he had not been cut apart and stitched together again without her leave. I am well, he said. You are pale. It was night. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Something in his voice made her look at him differently. He saw her notice the weight that was not there when he had ridden south. The thing that battle had set in him while he was still young enough to resent it. Her hand lingered on his arm. Then she saw the captives being brought in under guard, heard the murmur moving like wind through the yard. Kingslayer, Kingslayer, the Kingslayer is taken. And all the fierce intelligence in her face sharpened at once. Alive? She asked. Alive, Robb said. Good. No more than that. Good. Not because she pitied Jaime Lannister, and not because she had forgotten the man with white gold hair had once sat among those who scorned her husband in the king's hall. Good because some truths were simple. A dead enemy was carrion. A living enemy with value was a gate not yet shut. The gate boomed closed behind them. Men poured into the yard, laughing, limping, weeping, carrying captured standards and wounded friends, and the first long silence of the dead. Above it all, high on one of Riverrun's towers, A raven took wing into the wet morning and vanished south. The room where Hoster Tully lay had once been bright. Catelyn remembered it from girlhood as a place of open shutters and river air, of polished wood and her father's laughter, when he had not yet grown old enough for pride to harden into habit. Now the shutters were mostly closed against the damp. The rushes smelled faintly of mint and sickness, and the old lord in the bed seemed shrunken beneath his blankets, as if pain had been feeding on him in the dark for months and had finally found the bones. His face had gone thin and yellow, the lines at mouth and brow carved deep enough to hold shadow even by candlelight. Sometimes he knew her. Sometimes he knew only the ache in his belly and the ghosts in his memory. "Tansy," he murmured that morning, turning his head weakly against the pillow. "Tansy. No. No more." Catelyn took his hand and kissed the paper skin across the knuckles. "It is Cat, father." His eyes opened. For a moment they cleared, and she glimpsed the man who had taught her how to read the currents below Riverrun's walls, and how to tell a polite lie in a hall full of rivals. "Cat," he whispered. "The girls?" She might have lied if she had known how, but the knock had come already, and Brynden had opened the door, and Maester Vyman stood beyond it with the raven's message in his hands, and the color gone from his face. The letter had been sealed with the crown of the king and broken by a maester's fingers. Its contents were brief enough to fit in a child's palm and heavy enough to flatten a kingdom. Eddard Stark had been condemned for treason. Eddard Stark had confessed his crimes. King Joffrey, in his justice, had commanded his head struck off before the great sept of Baelor. Sansa Stark remained in the Queen's protection. Arya Stark had fled custody and could not presently be found. The words seemed false even after Vyman had read them twice. Catelyn had not cried out. She had sat very still with her father's hand between both of hers and thought, with a shocking clarity that frightened her. This is the instant on which the world tips. Everything before this remains where it was, no matter how badly it was made. Everything after this slides. Robb had come as Vyman read. He had not been summoned. He must have seen something in their faces or heard the silence that followed the reading, because he stood in the doorway and did not speak until no one else could. "What is it?" Maester Vyman looked to Catelyn. She could not remember nodding, but she must have, because he read it a third time. Robb did not move while the old man spoke. The rain tapped at the shutters. Hoster's breath rattled. Brynden's hand tightened on the hilt at his hip until the knuckles showed white through weathered skin. By the time the reading ended, the letter had become only parchment again. Yet the room had altered. It had less air in it. "My lord," Vyman said softly. Robb took the paper from him. He read it, though there was no need. His eyes ran over the lines once, then once again, and Catelyn saw the moment at which the words ceased to be ink and entered him as something living and merciless. His face did not crumple. She had feared that, and would have forgiven it, but it did not. He went white under the last of his boyhood color and stood very straight. "Sansa lives," he said. It was an answer to nothing any of them had said. "Yes," Catelyn told him. "And Arya?" The room had no answer for that. He nodded once. Not because he accepted it, but because there was nothing else for a man to do when grief handed him an emptiness and named it truth. Then he turned and walked out. She found him in the godswood of Riverrun, standing before the heart tree with his hands braced on the rough bole, head bowed. Rain had followed him there, dripping from leaf to leaf and running in narrow silver lines down the carved face. Gray Wind sat a few paces off, silent as a watchman. The wolf lifted his head when Catelyn came, but did not rise. For a time she said nothing. The godswood held its own quiet, old and stern. When Robb spoke, his voice came ragged with the effort of being controlled. He said he would take the black. "I know." He said it before the court. "I know." "Then why?" He turned then, and for an instant she saw not the commander of men, not the boy the North had followed through rain and blood, but the son whose world had always rested on the certainty that his father's word could still a room. Why kill him after that? Because cruelty was a kind of pleasure to some, she almost said. Because Joffrey was vain and weak, and wanted to hear a crowd shout while a better man died. Because Cersei had taught her son that power was what one did when all wiser courses felt like insults. Because this realm had grown fat on bright banners, and forgotten that fools with crowns could be more ruinous than madmen with axes. Instead, she said, because your father's honor frightened them more alive than dead. Robb's mouth twisted. Then they should have feared him more. He had not cried in the room, but tears came there, sudden and furious, though he turned his face away from her as if ashamed. Catelyn took him in her arms and felt how hard he shook once the iron in him gave way. He was too tall now for the comfort to fit as it once had. That was one grief among too many. She held him anyway. When he had mastered himself, he pulled back first. He scrubbed his face with both hands, leaving wet streaks across dirt and dried blood. The lords will ask what we do now, he said. Yes. And what do I tell them? That vengeance was a fire with no talent for choosing its fuel. That the men who loved his father most would now try to honor him by destroying themselves. That Ned Stark, who had spent his life standing against falsehood, had died because the South mistook decency for softness and law for weakness. That none of it would return him. You tell them the truth, she said. That your father is dead. That your sisters are not both lost. That Jaime Lannister lives in chains. And that if men mean to look to you, you had best decide whether you want them to see a son in pain or a lord who can turn pain into purpose. Noon. The council met before noon in a hall that still smelled of damp wool and last night's victory feast. Edmure came with his arm in a sling and fury in every word. Great John Umber arrived half-drunk and wholly dangerous, his huge hands restless on the board as if even maps ought to feel the threat of him. Lords of the Trident filled the benches in wet cloaks and dented mail, the lesser men behind them packed shoulder to shoulder. Brynden stood near the hearth. Maester Vyman hovered with more ravens than sleep. On the walls, the Trout of Riverrun and the Direwolf of Stark hung side by side, and Catelyn thought that if cloth could bleed, the banners would have done so. They butcher my father's lands and murder your lord father under a sept, Edmure said. What remains to say? We ride. Where? Brynden asked. Edmure stared. At Tywin. Tywin is not one place, nephew. He is an army. If you want to strike him, pick a road. Nunday? The Western Road. The Gold Road. If need be. Greyjohn slammed a fist on the table hard enough to make the cups jump. Gold Road, King's Road, any road south so long as there's Lannister blood at the end of it. Murmurs of agreement rolled through the room. Catelyn watched Robb at the head of the board. He had changed his tunic but not his expression. The letter lay folded by his hand. He had not spoken yet, and because he had not, each man in the room began speaking louder to fill the space. The Queen has the girls, said Sir Mark Piper. If we sit idle, we tell the realm the Starks may be slaughtered one by one, and answer it with mourning. If we strike now, said Galbart Glover, we strike hard. Lord Tywin lost his son in a battle. The West will be reeling, or baiting us, Brynden said. Roose Bolton was not in the hall, being away with the foot, but Catelyn could hear him in that caution all the same. Tywin Lannister had not risen to his place by being the sort of man who failed once, and then obligingly waited to fail again. A messenger from the twins had brought word that the realm was splitting faster than any river in flood. Renly Baratheon had taken a crown in High Garden with the Reach at his back. Stannis held Dragonstone in a silence that boded ill. The boy on the Iron Throne had his city, his mother, and whatever men his grandsire could spare from the war now raging in the Riverlands. Each claimant called for loyalty as if loyalty were a cloak hanging forgotten by the door. Catelyn looked down the table at her son. He had heard all of it. She could see the numbers moving behind his eyes now, though grief had not yet had time to settle into anything useful. That too was part of lordship, being asked for arithmetic while your heart still bled. At last, Robb laid both hands flat on the board. The hall quieted. My father is dead, he said. No one moved. He died because men in King's Landing thought his honor could be mocked, and because a boy with a crown desired a spectacle more than peace. I will not forget that, nor will any of you. But if we ride blind with anger, we give them more Starks to kill and more River Lords to burn. Jaime Lannister is in chains. Sansa lives. Arya may yet live. Lord Tywin still has an army. So before any man roars for vengeance, he will tell me first how he means to win it. Nay. The room remained still for another breath, but it was a different stillness now. Not agreement. Not yet. Something narrower, harsher. A listening. Outside, rain ran down the walls of Riverrun and gathered in the waters below, cold and relentless as bad news carried from tower to tower. The dead were washed before dusk. Riverrun septons moved among the bodies with basins and cloths, muttering prayers that seemed too small for the ruin war made of the living. Men who had laughed at breakfast lay pale and formal under linen by evening. Their wounds had gone from glory to ugliness, and no one looking on could mistake death for anything noble. Catelyn went where she was needed until even her grief felt tired, but Robb vanished for an hour. And when she found him again, he stood among the biers with his hands clasped behind his back like a man much older than 15. The Stark sons lay side by side. Their fathers stood over them like winter itself. Rickard had not removed his sword belt. Perhaps he feared that if he did, his hands would need another occupation and choose a throat. He did not turn when Robb approached. His gaze remained fixed on the faces of the boys he had brought south to win honor, and now must send north as bones. "You buried none of yours today," he said. Robb absorbed the blow without flinching. "No. Yet." Catelyn, a few steps off, felt the words strike the air. Around them, men lowered their eyes. That was the danger grief made. It could turn truth into a weapon and hurl it at whoever stood nearest. Robb came to stand beside him. "If I could trade places with them, I would not hesitate." Rickard's jaw flexed. "Would you? A lord's son is always brave with another man's dead. My father is dead. That did it." Stark turned sharply then. The anger in him faltered against the bare fact. Not because the pain matched, no pains ever truly matched, but because only a fool mistook one fresh wound for the absence of another. "I had heard," he said after a moment. "I heard this morning." Rickard looked at him as if measuring whether boyhood yet remained in his face and resenting what he found. "Then we both have cause." "Yes. And the cause has a name. Jaime Lannister." At that, the old lord's mouth thinned with grim satisfaction. "Then you understand." "I understand that if he dies now, Lord Tywin loses only a son. If he lives, Lord Tywin keeps losing sleep." Rickard barked a laugh that held no mirth. "Sleep? My sons are cold, and you talk to me of sleep." "Now, I talk to you of winning." "Winning?" Stark bent and pulled back the cloth from Torrhen's face. The boy's lips were blue. His brow split where steel had met bone. "This was your victory." The words hit harder because Robb had thought the same thing in the wood and since. For a heartbeat, Catelyn feared he would answer as a boy, and the thing would break open. Instead, he said, very quietly, "Then let me make something of it." Rickard stared at him long enough that the torches seemed to gutter lower. "If you fail," he said at last, "I will remind you of their names every day until I die." "You should," Robb said. The older man covered Torrhen's face again. "Go look on your lion then. See what price you put on my sons." So Robb did. Jaime had been lodged in a tower room stripped of anything that might be turned to use. The windows were narrow slits too high for a man in chains to reach. The door had been barred from the outside and posted with guards from houses that had lost kin in the battle. When Robb entered, the Kingslayer sat on a stool with his wrists shackled before him and one shoulder against the wall. Someone had cleaned the blood from his face. Without it, he looked even younger, and somehow more dangerous. As if blood had at least declared him a creature of the same mortal clay as other men. He glanced up. If you've come to offer me a comfortable cell, I'm afraid I've already taken a dislike to this one. Robb closed the door behind him but did not sit. I came to look at you. That is rarely a hardship. Robb let the insolence pass over him. 2 Karstarks are dead because you tried to cut your way to me. Jaime considered. I killed more than 2. You remember those? I remember all the boys whose fathers have glared at me since dawn. They blur together after a while. The answer was cruel by design. Robb knew that, and knowing did not take the heat from it. Do you delight in it? In what? Being hated. Jaime rested his head back against the stone. Hated men sleep very well once they accept the arrangement. It's loved men who toss and turn. No. Robb thought of his father on the steps of the Great Sept and had to unclench his hand before it became a fist. You speak like a man who's never paid for anything. Jaime's gaze sharpened. Is that what you think? Because I sit in gold armor and women sigh when I smile. I think you never had to weigh what someone else's sons were worth. A flicker crossed Jaime's face then, gone quickly enough that Robb could not have named it with certainty. Annoyance, perhaps, or recognition. You're wrong, Jaime said. I have weighed such things. Usually while some old man in silk told me what a Lannister life was worth beside them. Nadja, and I, nah. My father did not raise me to count like that. No, Jaime said. Your father raised you to believe men are what they claim to be. He leaned forward. The chains at his wrists whispered. Here is the lesson your noble father left you, Stark. Men are what the day requires. Today I am a prisoner because I thought you were your father's son in the simplest way. Honorable, direct, eager to save kin with a charge and a banner. Instead you laid a trap in the dark. Well done. Tomorrow you may think to bargain. Also well done if you can stomach it. The day after, my father may tear half this countryside apart to get me back. Better still, if you enjoy fire. All of it is true at once. May. Robb had expected mockery. He had not expected instruction. You think my father will bargain, he said. Jaime smiled without warmth. No guy tie. I think he will count. Bargaining is what lesser men do when counting frightens them. Nah. And if the count comes poorly for him, then it comes poorly for everyone. There it was again, that hard, bright intelligence under the arrogance. The thing that made Jaime Lannister more than a golden story wrapped in flesh. Robb looked at the chains, the bare room, the 2 guards outside the door who would have gladly slit this man's throat if given word. He imagined Tywin Lannister somewhere to the south or west, hearing by Raven that his son lived but not in freedom. A dead Jaime would be grief and vengeance. A living Jaime was pressure. My sister is in your family's hands, Robb said. Jaime's expression altered by a breath. The pretty one, yes. Robb stepped forward so quickly the stool scraped as Jaime straightened. You will not speak of her that way again. Or what? You glower me to death? Grey Wind's low growl rolled from the doorway where he had slipped in silent as smoke, shouldering the guard back with sheer certainty. Jaime's eyes cut to the direwolf. For the first time since Robb had met him, amusement left his face completely. There, Jaime said softly. That, at least, I respect. Robb held his gaze another beat, then stepped back. You live because I choose it. No, Jaime said. I live because you are not a fool. Do not flatter yourself with mercy. Robb left before anger could decide otherwise. In the passage outside, Grey Wind paced at his side with ears pricked and hackles half raised, still disliking the scent behind the door. Robb laid a hand briefly on the direwolf's neck, feeling heat and muscle, and the steadiness of a creature that never doubted what should be torn and what should be spared. Below, in the yard, men were setting the pyres. By the time night settled full over Riverrun, the smoke of the dead had gone up into the rain, and every stone in the castle seemed to hold either grief or expectation. Both were heavy. Both leaned on Robb's shoulders now, whether he welcomed them or not. No hall in Westeros ever holds grief for long without asking it to become something useful. By nightfall, the councils had become argument. The argument had become drink, and the drink had become one of those dangerous hours in which men mistake exhaustion for certainty. The great hall of Riverrun blazed with torches. Trenchers steamed. Casks were rolled open. Men who had spent the day carrying dead now carried cups instead. And though the mood was dark, darkness had never prevented lords from declaring themselves wise. Robb sat beneath the trout banner and listened to the noise climb. Edmure wanted the West bloodied in answer for every field burned in the Riverlands. The Riverlords backed him because pain often made a poor strategist and an excellent audience. Greyjohn Umber had already argued 3 times with men who stood no higher than his shoulder, and would have argued 300 if ale held out. Meg Mormont spoke seldom, but when she did, the men nearest her stopped talking, for there was iron in her voice, and the women of Bear Island had no patience for decorative speech. Galbart Glover watched with those grave, deep-set eyes of his, saying little, missing nothing. The talk went round and round the same sharp center. Joffrey had killed Eddard Stark. Renly had crowned himself. Stannis would soon do the same or die trying. The South had devoured justice and called it politics. Why then should the North go begging for permission to remember what it was? Catelyn knew the answer and hated it. Because remembering what one was could become another form of vanity. Because men adored the sound of ancient rites, when ancient rites did not require feeding armies in winter. Because a crown put on in rage sat no lighter for being forged from old truths. Yet when she looked at the benches packed with Northmen who had come so far for the son of Winterfell, and at the Riverlords whose lands had become the anvil between lion and wolf, she could not quite say they were wrong to seek a shape for their suffering. A letter from Dragonstone had reached them at dusk, though not from Stannis himself. It demanded fealty in hard, precise language and named Joffrey no true king. Another message had come days before from men riding for Renly, all bright promise and high words. 2 Baratheon brothers, each calling the other usurper. One boy king in King's Landing with Stark blood on his hands. None of them had lifted a finger to save Ned. None of them would bleed for the North unless the North first bled for them. Greyjohn rose so suddenly that the bench behind him tipped and crashed to the floor. "I have had enough," he roared. That silenced even Edmure. The huge man stood swaying slightly, not from uncertainty but from drink and the breadth of his chest. His beard shone with spilled ale. Fire flashed along the blade when he dragged his sword free and lifted it high. "We were not made to kneel to every Southron squabble," he thundered. "The Dragon Kings are gone, and good riddance. The Stag brothers claw each other. The Lion Cub killed the one true lord in the capital because he was too craven to let an honest man live. And now they send us papers and commands and ask us to bend like reeds. I say no." A rumble answered him. He pointed his sword toward Robb. "There sits the only king I mean to follow." The hall seemed to draw breath all at once. Catelyn had known something like this was coming from the moment the letter naming Ned's death had been read, and the first men had looked not at heaven or hearth, but at Robb. Grief wanted a face. Hope wanted one as well. In times like these, the two were easily mistaken. "King in the North," someone said. "King of the Trident," shouted another. The words leapt from mouth to mouth. Galbart Glover stood, then Mage Mormont, then the Greyjohn again, kneeling this time with less grace than force, his sword laid across both hands. Lords and masterless captains and hard-eyed men from halls so small their names rarely crossed a maester's ink began to rise and kneel and strike the butts of spears against the floor. Catelyn looked to Robb. He had gone very still. He did not glow with delight. He did not look like a boy handed a story. He looked, in that instant, exactly as he had looked when deciding Jaime's fate, as if something immense and dangerous had been placed in his hands, and everyone in the room expected him to say yes before it burned him. "Robb," she said softly, though the hall was so loud only the gods could have heard. He stood. The shouting became a wave. Men who had buried brothers that day roared till their faces reddened. Men from the neck and the barrows and the stony shore lifted cups, swords, fists. The troutmen followed because the Riverlands had always understood that drowning alone was worse than drowning beside an ally, and because if a king must be made, better perhaps one whose father had died for honor than a southern boy who had never heard the words spoken without mockery. Robb lifted one hand. Little by little the hall quieted, though Gretchen still breathed like a bull at the center of the rushes. "My lords," Robb said. The title changed in his mouth even as he spoke it. "You do me honor I did not ask for." "That's the best kind," Gretchen bellowed, and laughter broke rough and brief through the room. Robb's mouth tightened, not quite a smile. "My father is dead. Your sons and brothers and fathers are dead. Men would have me take a crown while their blood is scarcely dry." He let that settle. "If I take any title from you tonight, understand what you give. Not songs. Not old words polished bright by memory. You give me your dead to answer for and your living to keep. You give me winter when it comes and hunger if the harvest fails and every child buried because we chose badly here. If you would still have me." "We would," Meg said, "before anyone else could." A murmur rose, fierce and unanimous. Robb drew a breath. Catelyn could see the moment in which he realized refusal would shatter what loyalty had built, and acceptance would bind him just as tightly. Some crowns were forged of beaten gold. This one was made of expectation and injury, no less heavy for being invisible. "Then I will spend my blood before I spend yours lightly," he said. "That I swear." The answer was enough. The hall broke open in sound. "King in the north. King in the north." The cry battered the rafters, rolled through torch smoke, spilled out into the yards and towers where men took it up without knowing yet what shape it would give the war. Catelyn rose, because every eye in the room would otherwise have been on her seated silence, and because pride, damn it, came whether she welcomed it or not. Her son stood among roaring lords with his father's gray eyes, and something colder newly added to them, and for one sharp, painful instant, she loved him so fiercely she thought it might undo her. Then the cry changed. "King in the north and the trident." That gave her pause. The River Lords shouted it with wine and desperation both. A boy from Winterfell to hold the rivers. A wolf to bite the lion. A son in place of the father they had admired too late. Catelyn looked at Edmure and saw that he shouted too, though perhaps from loyalty as much as conviction. Brynden said nothing. He had crossed his arms and was watching Robb with a soldier's eye, measuring not glory but consequences. When at last the hall's noise ebbed enough for men to return to drinking, Robb sat again, but not as he had before. Some unseen line had been crossed. Men came to bend toward him now. Men who had spoken over him hours ago now asked leave before speaking. That was what crowns did, even when no circlet touched the brow. Much later, when the torches had burned lower and the benches were strewn with snoring men, Catelyn found him alone on a gallery above the hall. The night wind came in through arrow slits. Below, the rivers moved black under the moon. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." Neither of them smiled. He kept his eyes on the dark below. "Did I do wrong?" Catelyn stood beside him. The stone was cold under her hands. "You did what the room required." "That is not the same answer." "No." She looked out where he looked. "But it is often the only one rulers get." He was quiet for a while. Down in the yard, a horse stamped. Somewhere far off, a man began singing and forgot the words halfway through. "They called me king," Robb said at last, as if the fact still startled him. "They did." It sounded less like honor than a gate shutting. Catelyn laid a hand briefly on his sleeve. "Then remember the sound." Morning came gray and sensible, as if the world had no patience for what men had shouted in the heat of torchlight. Mist lay thick over the rivers, drawn low and wide across the water, so that the towers of Riverrun seemed to rise from cloud rather than stone. Catelyn stood on the ramparts with Brynden Tully and watched the camp stir awake below. Fires smoldered red among the tents. Men moved like dark pins through the haze. Horns sounded somewhere to the east. The cold had sharpened everything, even the smell of wet earth. Brynden leaned both forearms on the parapet. "They've given him a crown made of air," he said. "Strange thing. Air can still choke." Catelyn drew her cloak tighter. "Would you have had him refuse?" "No. They'd have loved him less for wisdom than for pride. Men in that hall wanted a king the way drowning men want a hand. They do not stop to ask whether the hand belongs to a swimmer or another drowning fool." She gave him a sideways look. "There speaks my uncle. There speaks a knight who has watched 3 kings grow old and ugly under silk." Brynden rubbed rain from his beard. "A title does not concern me so much as what he does with it." Footsteps sounded behind them. Robb came up the stair alone, save for Grey Wind, who ranged ahead, nose testing every damp corner as if Riverrun itself might conceal treachery in the stone. Robb looked as though he had slept little, but wakefulness sat on him cleanly now. The rawest edge of grief had gone inward. Catelyn knew better than to take comfort from that. Grief could harden a man into something useful. It could also harden him into something breakable. "You are up early," she said. "I have men to count." He came to the wall beside them and looked out over the camp. "And roads." "Good," Brynden said. "Count roads before banners. Banners tell lies." Robb's mouth moved in the shadow of a smile. "I had guessed as much." The old knight straightened. "Then hear mine. If you ride west now for glory, Tywin will choose the ground and the pace. If you ride south for vengeance, one Baratheon brother or the other will use your anger as a ladder. If you sit too long, the lords who shouted you king will decide the title has gone to sleep. So, which poor choice do you favor?" "No." Robb rested both hands on the merlon before him. Water beaded on the stone beneath his fingers. "None of them." "Wise," Brynden said. "Now choose anyway." Catelyn watched her son's face. It was never harder than when he was thinking. He had inherited Ned's way of moving inward before speaking, as if each word must walk a narrow bridge and had better not be pushed. "Tywin wants me moving," Robb said. "A man who sits behind walls gives him 1 problem. A man who chases him gives him 5. Brynden grunted approval. "Renly and Stannis want the same," Robb went on. "Not because they care what becomes of me, but because as long as we are bleeding here, neither needs fear the north behind him. And while we bleed, Balon Greyjoy may hear that Winterfell's men are south and wonder whether old defeats still sting less than new opportunities." At that, Catelyn looked sharply at him. "You think of Balon already?" "I think of all the men my father ever called proud. They are the ones most likely to take what grief leaves unguarded." The answer sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the weather. Winterfell, with its walls and godswood and children's laughter, had never seemed farther away than in that moment. Brynden studied Robb, and something like respect deepened in his lined face. Then, perhaps the hall's roaring did not entirely drown sense. "I am trying not to let it." Robb's gaze went toward the west, where beyond leagues of river and field the lions still held their own country untouched. "Jaime lives. Tywin will want him back." "Of course. And Sansa lives in King's Landing." Catelyn heard the change in his voice at that. However much men shouted king, he was still brother enough for pain to tighten around that single name. "She does," Catelyn said. "Then as long as Jaime lives, Tywin cannot forget my sister." "Tywin forgets nothing," Brynden said. "Especially not kin. He loves no one, in my view. But he values his blood the way misers value coin. That may be enough." Catelyn watched the mist drift under the battlements. Below them, a file of men emerged from the pale murk, carrying shields to a wagon, their breath showing white. "What are you saying, Robb?" He did not answer at once. When he did, the words came measured. "I am saying I do not think my father would have thanked me to avenge him by spending the north into ruin. I am saying every mile farther south I ride is another mile between our men and their homes, and another mile in which Tywin may turn from enemy to necessity for someone else. I am saying Joffrey killed my father, but Tywin commands the armies that could either finish burning these lands or be made to stop." Brendan's brows went up. "Made to stop?" "Yes. And how would you do that?" by making them costly to continue. By showing Tywin that my sister and his son are weights on the same balance. Now, hostage exchange. Maybe more, maybe less. I have not yet decided. Brynden rubbed at his beard. If you mean to do this, you will need a tongue finer than the Greyjoy's and less likely to bite its own anger. Robb gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. Most tongues are. Catelyn saw the shape of the thing before he spoke it, and perhaps that was why it did not shock her when it came. I want to send terms, he said. The wind moved through the crenels with a soft whistle. Brynden glanced at her, then back at Robb. Terms. Not surrender, not peace. A pause with teeth in it. An opening. For Tywin Lannister? For the man holding the larger army and the weaker king? Robb's face hardened slightly. If Joffrey had not murdered my father, there might have been another path. Since he did, I will not trust the throne. But I may still test the hand behind it. Catelyn weighed her answer before speaking. If you send such terms, many men will hate it. Many men already hate it when I keep Jaime breathing. This would be more. Yes. Brynden's voice came dry as old parchment, which usually means it's worth considering. Robb turned to his uncle. Would you? I would consider anything that stops young men from mistaking their anger for strategy. The Blackfish's eyes narrowed. But I would not send a fool, and I would not send a letter soft enough for Tywin to mistake it for need. I know. He did know. Catelyn could see it. That was the strange new burden of watching her son grow into command so violently. He knew too much too quickly, yet still had to pay for knowing with each step. If I go to him, Robb said, and there was no ease in the words. It cannot be as some begging boy. He would smell weakness. You should not go, Catelyn said at once. His head turned sharply. Mother. No. Duh. If there is to be parley, let it be through someone who can carry dignity without appearing desperate. Someone Tywin will not dare seize lightly. Someone who can speak for you and for Riverrun both. You. She held his gaze. Yes. The answer hurt him. She saw it. Yet beneath the hurt, there was recognition too. Because the same reasoning had already crossed his mind and disgusted him with its necessity. Brynden nodded slowly. He might, Catelyn said. Or he might insult me and send me back with less than I bring. But even that would tell us something. Robb stared out toward the unseen west. When he spoke again, his voice had gone very quiet. I do not want to learn this way. No one does, Catelyn said. Below them, a horn sounded twice. The camp continued its waking business, indifferent to the shape of crowns and the cost of letters. At last Robb drew in a long breath and let it out. Then we write. Harrenhal had a talent for making powerful men look temporary. Its halls were too large by half, its towers too broad, its hearths built for giants long since dead or fled into song. Firelight could not warm the scale of it. Even at a lord's table, there was always a sense that some older, colder thing was listening just beyond the circle of light, and finding the ambitions of living men small. Tywin Lannister did not care for haunted castles, but he cared for their usefulness, and Harrenhal sat astride the Riverlands like a mailed fist. He stood over the war table in one of its lesser chambers with Kevin to his right, and a damn Marbrand opposite, and the carved lion token that marked Jaime's command still sat on the map where a lesser man had left it days before, as if wood might deny the truth that raven feathers had brought. Tywin had not moved it. He preferred reminders where sentiment expected removal. The fords remained contested, Adam was saying. Piper scouts on one bank, Bracken riders on the other, and Stark men slipping in and out of the villages like they grew there. If the young wolf intends to strike west again, he's taken his time of it. No. Tywin's gaze remained on the map. He has already struck west in effect. By capturing Jaime. By refusing to be where Jaime expected him. Kevin folded his hands into his sleeves. The boy was well counseled. Or not counseled at all and merely less stupid than advertised. That drew the faintest twitch at the corner of Adam's mouth. Tywin did not smile. How many times now has the realm confused Northern Reserve with ignorance? Your nephew did. Joffrey did. Half the court in King's Landing did. Eddard Stark is dead because the capital mistook plain dealing for simplicity. Now his son has answered them with a trap in the dark. Indeed. Kevin gave him a measured look. You speak of Eddard Stark more charitably in death than you did in life. I speak of him accurately. He was dangerous because he believed what he said. Men like that bend slower than courtiers imagine. Tywin lifted the letter from King's Landing again, though he had no need to read it. He knew every line. Joffrey had played at kingship with an executioner's sword, and opened wounds that might have been stitched closed by exile. The boy on the throne has cost us dearly. Kevin's face did not alter. Would you have had Stark sent to the wall? I would have had him alive. Tywin set the parchment down. A living father might have kept the North uncertain. A dead one has given them clarity. Robb Stark has been named king. So I hear. The word meant less to him than others thought. Men named kings in wine and fury every year in some corner of the world. The question was not whether the title would stick to the boy. The question was whether the boy understood its price. Titles are wind unless backed by granaries, roads, marriages, and fear. At present, he possesses one of those in abundance. Fear? Adam asked. Roads? Tywin said. Adam laughed once. Kevin did not. A servant came and refilled the wine no one had asked for. Tywin dismissed him with a glance. On the map, carved stags marked Renly and Stannis in separate colors. The South was becoming a quarrel of brothers. Joffrey sat in King's Landing with Cersei and whatever statecraft the Queen could wrench from vanity and indignation. Tyrion was on the road, if reports were to be trusted, and might arrive in time to prevent the court from stabbing itself before an enemy did it for them. Meanwhile, the Riverlands smoldered. Jaime sat in a northern cell, and the Stark boy had not surged west in triumph as any half-drunk youth might have done. That last fact interested Tywin more than he wished to admit. He delays, Kevin said, following the same line of thought, either to consolidate or because he has lost nerve. Tywin looked up at him. Which would you prefer? Kevin's answer came at once. Nerve. Then prepare for the other. He moved the lion token at last, not to a new field, but to the side of the board, where it lay on the bare wood. Jaime, absent. A hole in the line. Not fatal. Nothing was fatal until a man treated it as such. Yet the lack altered all calculations. One did not rear children in a great house without understanding that affection and utility were not enemies. Jaime was beloved by Cersei, useful to House Lannister, and in Tywin's private accounting tied to legacy in ways that could not be admitted aloud. A dead son could be avenged. A captive son had to be negotiated around, and negotiation demanded time. Time was the one thing the realm seemed determined to deny him. What word from Gregor? Tywin asked. Raids continue, Adam said. He reports rich forage and little organized resistance. Then Gregor is writing of his appetites, not his success. Adam bowed his head slightly. He knew the truth of it. Gregor Clegane was a mace in human shape, effective, blunt, ruinous to friend and foe alike if left swinging too long. Tywin rested both hands on the edge of the table. Send word to Sir Gregor that he is to hold what he takes long enough to be counted. Burned fields feed no army. Kevin's brows lifted. A restraint? A correction? Tywin's voice remained even. If Stark intends to posture as protector of these lands, I will not help him by making martyrs of every pig farmer between here and Riverrun. That was not mercy. It was mathematics. Yet even mathematics could look like moderation to men desperate for any change in the weather. Do you think he means to posture only? Kevin asked. Tywin considered the boy he had never yet met. Young, yes. Northern, yes. Victorious in ways that made old men uneasy. Had accepted the acclamation of a kingdom rather than rejecting it like a fool or preening beneath it like a child. Had kept Jaime alive. No, doubt. Not posture only. "I think," Tywin said, "that Robb Stark is discovering he may have been born for war and trained for rule at the same time. Men like that are troublesome." "Nuggy." "Then we break him before he decides which he prefers," Adam said. Tywin let the silence answer first. "Perhaps," he said then, "if he offers us the chance. If not, we may find he is worth more unbeaten than broken, for a while." Kevin's gaze sharpened. "You smell terms." "I smell caution. Sometimes it has the same scent." Outside, the wind moved through Harrenhal's monstrous towers with a hollow moan that lesser men called ghosts. Tywin ignored it. The dead had no place at his table. The living did, and among the living a new player had declined the obvious move. That alone made him worthy of attention. "Have the scribes ready," he said. "If the boy is clever, he will send words before swords." Theon found him where boys and lords alike often sought air when walls grew close. On the inner parapet above the yard, with the sounds of hammers below, and the rivers beyond shining hard and colorless under a washed afternoon sky. He had a bow in his hand, though there was no target. Theon Greyjoy liked to look occupied when what truly occupied him could not be mocked aloud. He leaned one shoulder against the cold stone and watched a raven circle down toward the rookery, as if he meant to put an arrow through it on principle. "They're saying king now without checking whether you're listening," he said as Robb approached. "Congratulations, you've become inconveniently important." Robb came to stand beside him. "Have I?" "You have if everyone keeps kneeling. It makes supper awkward." That was Theon's way. Levity drawn sharp enough to serve as armor. He had worn it since Winterfell, since before Winterfell perhaps. Over wounds, pride would rather joke than show. Robb had always known it and mostly forgiven it. Today he found less forgiveness in him than before. "You wanted to speak with me," Robb said. Theon spun the arrow in his fingers. "I did. News from Pyke will be coming soon if it hasn't already. Balon will have heard of your victories, of Ned's death, of the realm tearing itself to strips. If there was ever a time to win the Ironborn, it's now." Robb glanced at him. "Win them?" Theon grinned. "All right, perhaps not win. Point, nudge. Convince my father that lions look softer from the sea. And how would you do that?" "By going to him." The words fell lightly, but not so lightly that their weight could be mistaken. Below, men led spare horses across the yard. Gray Wind padded ahead a few steps, turned, and sat on his haunches between them as if he too had heard the challenge hidden inside the casual tone. Theon went on before Robb could answer. "He is not a man to be summoned by Raven like some bannerman in wool. He'd take insult where he ought to take profit. But send me, and he must hear it. I know his mind better than you. I know his captains. I know what songs they like sung over meat and ale and what insults they pretend not to mind. Let me speak for you. Let me bring the Kraken into this war, and the West will have more shores to fear than roads." "Ned Kabai." It was good sense on the surface. Better than good. In another hour, another mood, another life perhaps, Robb might have embraced it gladly. Theon was bold where other men hesitated. He knew Pyke, knew Ironborn vanity, knew the old names and hidden resentments. In the story one told before the telling became reality, this was where a foster brother was sent home with trust and purpose, and the world rewarded faith because it was just. But Catelyn's words had not left him, nor had the colder arithmetic that had taken root since the Raven from King's Landing. Every road now looked double to him, one path plain, the other concealed beneath it like a trap under leaves. "Would your father hear me?" Robb asked. "Or hear that I am far from Winterfell and hungry for allies?" Theon's smile thinned. "Both, I expect. Men hear what profits them." "Then what profits Balon Greyjoy?" "War," Theon said at once. "Plunder, old grievances, the chance to repay Robert Baratheon and your father for making him kneel." "My father did not make him kneel. He helped put him down after Balon rose." "No, a distinction Ironborn rarely cherish. Robb rested his hands on the stone. "And if I send you, what does your father hear besides profit?" Theon's voice cooled. "That his son comes home." There it was. Not politics only. Not ever politics only. Beneath all Theon's laughter lived that unhealed place where boyhood had been taken from him and remade as hostage courtesy at Winterfell. Robb had known it in theory. It was different to see it burning so close. "And if he hears instead," Robb said, "that his son comes because Robb Stark needs him." Theon's eyes went flat. "Then he hears the truth. A truth that may invite him north. Or west. Or both." Theon gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Seven hells. Listen to you. 1 week of being called king and you start smelling plots and gull droppings." Robb's temper stirred. "Ned Stark taught me to think before I gambled men's lives." And where did that bring him? The words hung between them the instant they were spoken, too naked to be recalled. Theon looked away first. "I did not mean." "Yes, you did." The yard below had gone suddenly louder, though perhaps that was only the blood in Robb's ears. He stared at the raven now perched on the rookery tower and thought of his father's face, grave and kind and impossible to reconcile with a headsman's sword. The easy answer would have been anger. The harder one was clarity. "I am not sending you," he said. Theon blinked. "What?" "To Pyke. Not now." A flush climbed from Theon's throat to his cheekbones. "You think I'd turn cloak? I think your father is Balon Greyjoy. That's no answer. It is all the answer this war requires." Theon set the bow down with dangerous care. "I rode with you. I bled for you. I've taken your jokes and your northern snows and your holy silences for 10 years, and when at last I ask to be of use in the one place I know better than any man in this castle, you cage me? Nah. I keep you where I know you, like a hawk hooded on a fist, like a man whose blood may be called on from both sides." Theon laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it, only the bright edge of injury. "You want truth? Here is some. I was never your man the way Greyjohn is your man, or Glover, or Karstark. I was your father's ward with good teeth and a talent for making your brothers laugh. But I chose you in this war, Robb. I did not have to." "I know. Do you?" Theon stepped closer. "Because it sounds to me as though you've remembered at last what everyone in this bloody realm remembers when it suits them. That I am Balon's son first, and anything else only by sufferance." Robb held his gaze. That precisely because it was near enough to true to wound them both. "You are Balon's son," he said, "and you are my friend. The realm will try to make one of those kill the other if I let it. I want me about." For a moment, he thought Theon might strike him. Theon thought so too. He looked at his own hands as if surprised to find them empty. Then he snatched up the bow and slung it over his shoulder. "Keep me then," he said. "Keep me where you can see me, but don't mistake the chain for trust." He brushed past and went down the stair without another word. Gray wind rose and watched him go, hackles lifting and settling. Robb remained at the wall. The wind had freshened off the water, carrying the smell of river mud and wet stone and the iron tang of a forge somewhere below. He did not know whether he had saved Winterfell or merely planted one more resentment in a war already overgrown with them. He only knew that some choices declared themselves right by how little any man liked them. After a time, Brynden joined him. The old knight took one look toward the stair and asked, "That poor? Poor enough? And Pyke?" "No." Brynden nodded once. "Good. Balon Greyjoy has a talent for hearing weakness in every request. Best not sing to him while your back is turned." Robb let out a breath. "That is what I thought." "That," Brynden said, "is what kings must think before other men get themselves called wise for agreeing after the fact." Robb almost told him not to call him king. Instead he said, "If the gods are kind, perhaps I will not be one long." Brynden looked out over the yard where armor flashed and men trained and shouted and prepared to die for titles they half understood. The gods are seldom kind, he said, but now and then they reward caution. Make use of it while they are looking elsewhere. Night narrowed the world to candlelight, and within candlelight truths often came easier than they did by day. Catelyn sat in a small solar above the hall with parchment spread before her and a pot of wax warming beside the flame. Outside, the rivers whispered under the walls. Somewhere a guard coughed. Somewhere else a sentry called the hour and heard it answered. Riverrun slept uneasily around her, as castles did in wartime, half dreaming with a hand on the hilt. On the table beside the parchment lay one of Sansa's old bits of needlework that had somehow found its way south with baggage and grief. A little square of fabric sewn with flowers too delicate for war, their petals painstaking and precise. Catelyn had brought it out without quite knowing why. Perhaps because if she thought too long on Sansa and King's Landing without some gentler image near to hand, she feared what her mind would make in its place. Robb stood at the window slit, looking out into darkness. Firelight touched one side of his face and left the other in shadow. He had been silent for several minutes, though not idly. Catelyn could hear him thinking. "Ed Winterfell," he said at last. "I used to believe letters were clean things." She looked up. Clean. Ordered. Safe. Words folded up where they couldn't hurt anyone until the seal was broken. A sad little smile touched her mouth. "Then you were raised kinder than most lordlings." "I was raised sheltered." "No." She dipped the quill and tapped off the excess ink. "Not sheltered. Trusted. There is a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Sheltered children think the world cannot harm them. Trusted children think the world ought not. One belief is foolish. The other is merely innocent." "No, either way, the world teaches." "It does." He came to the table and sat opposite her. For a moment they simply looked at the blank parchment between them, both of them aware that emptiness could be more daunting than battle. A charge was simple once begun. A letter had to choose each cut with care. "What name do I sign?" Robb asked. Catelyn considered. "What truth do you mean to tell?" "That depends on which one Tywin will hear." "Then give him the truth most useful to your purpose." Robb's fingers drummed once against the table and stilled. "If I call myself king in the north, he may reject the letter before reaching the second line. If you do not, your own lords may call the letter craven if they learn of it. They need not know all of it." She studied him. "You are learning concealment quickly. I am learning survival. There is no comfort in that. Yet honesty sometimes came dressed as bitterness." Catelyn folded her hands. "Then right as both. Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell, called king in the north by the acclamation of his bannermen. Tywin will hear the claim without being commanded to honor it." Robb nodded slowly. "And the rest?" "The rest must tell him you understand what he values." "My sister." "Yes, and Jaime." Robb's jaw tightened. "I hate that he holds one and I the other as if they were pieces on a Savas board. Hatred will not change the game, only how well you play it." He looked down. "Did father ever speak to you of things like this? Of bargaining with men he despised?" "No, more than once." Catelyn remembered Ned in King's Landing in the first hard years after Robert's rebellion, coming home from council worn thin by compromise, and saying that justice in a realm was often forced to walk through rooms where it had to sit with men it would rather judge. He never enjoyed it. He never trusted it. But he understood that if every dishonorable man were denied speech, honest men would spend all their lives fighting and none governing. Robb absorbed that in silence. At length he said, "They called me king, and all I could think was that the title would make this harder. Because kings make demands, they do not write pleading letters. This will not be pleading." "No?" Catelyn said. "It had better not." He looked at her with a sudden ghost of his father in the set of his mouth. "Will Tywin believe I mean it? If the letter is cold enough." "I am not cold." "No." She lifted the quill. "Then lend me your resolve, and let the ink do the rest." Together, they composed it. Not peace, for the word would have been too large and too false. Not submission, for that was impossible while Sansa remained hostage and Ned lay murdered. What they wrote was narrower, and perhaps for that reason more dangerous. An offer of parley under safe conduct. Assurance that Jaime Lannister remained unharmed and would continue so while Sansa Stark did the same. Demand that raiding in the Riverlands cease at once as proof of Lord Tywin's authority over his own banners. Acknowledgement that the realm now faced claimants enough to drown it. And in the last lines, a simple brutal truth stripped of warmth. A dead son can be avenged. A living one may yet be restored. Robb dictated that line and then sat staring at the parchment after Catelyn wrote it, as if words once spoken could not be called back from the page any more than arrows from the air. "It sounds like threat," he said. "It is threat. It also sounds like plea. It is that as well." He gave a bleak, short laugh. "Good. Then perhaps Tywin will know it is sincere." Catelyn sanded the ink and waited for it to dry. If he answers, he will not answer the plea. He will answer the threat and pretend he has noticed nothing else. Day. Can such a man be dealt with? Such men are dealt with every day. That is why the realm remains forever half-mended. She folded the parchment with careful fingers. The direwolf seal went into the warm red wax beside the leaping trout of Tully. 2 sigils on one letter, wolf and river, necessity and blood tied together by melted resin, and the hope that another hard mind would respect visible leverage more than visible hatred. Robb watched her stamp the seals. "I should go." "No." His head came up. "Mother, you should not," she said more gently. "If Tywin means treachery, he will risk it more readily against you than me. If he means contempt, I can survive it with less damage to your cause. And if he means to listen, he will hear better from a mother than from the son he wants to imagine rash. That is too dangerous." Catelyn looked at him across the sealed letter, at the youth still clinging in faint lines around his mouth, and at the new lordship already settling into his shoulders, like mail he had not chosen but must now wear. All of this is too dangerous. He stood abruptly and paced to the hearth, then back again. Gray wind, stretched near the door, lifted his head but did not rise. "I should not ask it of you." "You have not. I offer it." He stopped beside her chair. "If anything happened." "If anything happens to me," she said, "you do what you have already begun to do. You count what remains and keep going. That is what war makes of families. It teaches them to love without the luxury of pretending love can guard every door." The fire snapped softly in the grate. Outside, water moved under moonlight unseen. At last Robb knelt beside her chair the way he had as a child after some scraped knee or guilty mischief. Though there was nothing childish in the grief that shadowed his face, he put his forehead briefly against her hand. "I do not want to become one of those men who learns to spend the people he loves." "You have not," she said. "That is why I am willing to go." When he rose, he seemed older for having knelt. He picked up the letter and looked at the seals one last time before giving it back to her. "If he refuses," he asked, "then we have lost nothing but illusions. And if he answers?" Catelyn closed her fingers over the letter. "Then the war changes shape." They gave her 20 riders, all sworn and chosen with care, and a white banner that looked cleaner than anything else in the world as they passed out through Riverrun's gate at dawn. Catelyn rode at their head in a plain dark cloak with the letter hidden inside her glove, and the river mist breaking around the horses' legs. Robb watched from the gatehouse above. She did not wave. Neither did he. The distance between them had gone beyond the reach of gestures. She saw the shape of him against the pale sky for a moment longer, with gray wind beside him like a second shadow, and then the curve of the walls took him from sight. The Riverlands opened before them, wounded and watchful. War had moved through the countryside like a fever through a child, swiftly, heedlessly, leaving weakness in every limb it touched. Fields stood half-harvested and trampled flat where horses had passed. Orchards had been stripped not by season but by men with saddlebags. Smoke still marked some villages a week after the fire, thin, bitter threads drifting from beams too damp to burn cleanly. More than once they passed a holdfast with the gate hanging broken, and no one bold enough to come out until the white banner was plainly seen. Even then, the faces that emerged held no welcome. Only the hard distrust of small folk who had seen too many banners and learned that cloth did not guarantee mercy. At one village, a woman stood in the black frame of what had been her doorway with a child on each side and stared as Catelyn rode by. One of the children had a burn scar climbing red from chin to ear. Another clutched a crust in both hands as if someone might snatch it away. Their mother's eyes flicked to the trout on her escort's surcoats, then to the white banner, then to Catelyn herself, measuring whether any of it would feed them. Catelyn reined up. One of her guards leaned close. "My lady?" She ignored him. "What happened here?" she asked the woman. The woman laughed once without mirth. "Knights," she said. The answer needed no further shape. Catelyn looked at the charred beam beside the door, at the black smears where smoke had crawled up the remaining wall, at the children's wary stillness. Knights, yes. Men in good steel and better birth. Men who took horses and grain and daughters and called it war if anyone wept too loudly. She thought of the letter hidden in her glove and felt a sudden violent revulsion at the neatness of wax beside this ruin. Words could ask for terms. Ash could only testify. She gave the woman what bread and dried meat they had to spare without crippling the ride. It was little. The child with the crust did not thank her. Why should he? Charity was not justice. It did not rebuild roofs or unburned bodies. When she rode on, the woman's stare followed her a long while. By midday, rain came fine and cold. It silvered the road and turned the horses dark to the knee. They passed a sept with one wall collapsed, and the crystal of its window gone to shards underfoot. A dead bell lay cracked in the grass beside it, half sunk in mud. One of the riders made the sign of the seven. Another muttered that all gods were deaf in wartime. Catelyn said nothing. She had no argument ready against evidence. That night they took shelter in a mill whose wheel had been hacked apart to deny grain to whichever side came second. The miller's widow gave them the loft because the lower room leaked, and because men with swords were difficult to refuse. Catelyn lay awake on rough straw, listening to rain tap the roof and thinking of Winterfell. Not the grand moments, not feasts or the turning of the seasons beneath banners. Small things. Bran's feet pounding down a corridor when he had been told not to run. Arya's hair impossible under any maid's comb. Sansa bent over embroidery with her brow furrowed in lovely concentration. Robb in the yard at 12 trying to match Jon blow for blow and laughing when he failed. Rickon, who had still been more temper than language when she left. The memory cut deeper than grief because it was ordinary. A life of ordinary days now endangered by every extraordinary one. Toward morning, she woke from a dream in which Ned stood on the battlements of Winterfell with snow in his hair and would not turn when she called. She rose before dawn and did not speak of it. On the second day, the land grew emptier and the signs of Lannister passage more organized. Broken huts gave way to taken storehouses. Roads had been trampled into obedience. Scouts appeared on ridgelines and vanished again. By noon, Catelyn knew they were watched. Her escort knew it too. Men sat straighter in their saddles. Hands drifted nearer sword hilts, though none touched hilt while the white flag snapped above them. A peace banner could stop an arrow if the archer feared his lord more than he hated his enemy. It did little against men who preferred hatred. They were a league from Harrenhal when the outriders showed themselves. Red cloaks darkened by rain. Gold upon shields. Horses lean from hard use. Their captain wore a crimson plume gone limp in the weather, and looked at Catelyn with the bright, calculating curiosity of a man who had expected some lesser messenger and found a greater one. "My Lady Stark," he said, though the courtesy came edged. "My father was Hoster Tully," Catelyn said. "My husband was Eddard Stark. I carry terms for Lord Tywin under peace banner." The captain glanced at the white flag and the 20 riders behind her. "Terms? Yes." He smiled thinly. "You may keep your escort outside the gates. That was always my expectation." The smile faded. Men who live by threat disliked finding it anticipated. They rode the last stretch under armed watch. Harrenhal rose through rain like a ruin, trying to remember its own arrogance. Its towers were too huge for grace, blackened and twisted from dragonfire generations old, their melted stone ridges catching the weather in long dark streaks. Even maimed, it dwarfed the country around it. No wonder fools dreamed of ruling from such a place. It looked like power should look to men who confused enormity with permanence. The gates opened reluctantly, chains rattling and shut behind them with a boom that rolled through Catelyn's bones. In the outer ward, men drilled in mud. Smiths hammered at damaged mail. Servants hurried with heads down and eyes averted. Everything smelled of wet horses, old smoke, and the strain of keeping too many armed men lodged in a place that resented them. Catelyn dismounted without waiting for help. Her escort remained under guard in the yard. A steward in red and gold came bowing just shallowly enough to remind her whose roof this was, and informed her that Lord Tywin would receive her at sunset. "Of course," she said. Delay as display. She had expected no less. They lodged her in a chamber large enough for 3 ladies and warm enough for 1. A brazier burned. Fresh water waited in a basin. There was bread, cheese, and a flagon of wine on a table, all perfectly adequate and therefore entirely strategic. Tywin Lannister understood hospitality the way other men understood siegecraft, as a means of arranging the field. Catelyn washed the road from her face and changed into the least travel-stained gown her maid had packed. When the knock came at last, the sun had sunk blood-red behind the monstrous western towers. She tucked the letter into her sleeve and followed the steward through corridors broad enough for carts, under ceilings that vanished into shadow. Every footstep echoed. Every torch seemed too small. At the end of one long gallery before a door bound in black iron, the steward stopped. "My lady," he said, and opened it. Tywin Lannister stood when she entered, which told Catelyn 2 things at once: that he meant to honor her rank, and that he wanted her to notice it. He was taller than she remembered, or perhaps age had only sharpened him into seeming so. Time had not softened him as it softened lesser men. It had refined. The face was clean-shaven and stern, every line cut with purpose, the blonde hair touched with pale silver at the temples, the eyes a green so clear they seemed at first almost colorless. He wore no crown, no ceremonial armor, only a dark doublet rich enough to speak for itself and a chain with a lion worked in gold at the throat. His hands rested on the back of a chair as if the room, the table, the war, and the castle itself were all things he had temporarily permitted to stand. "Lady Stark," he said. "Lord Lannister." There were no wasted courtesies after that. A servant drew out a chair for her. Another offered wine. Tywin accepted a cup for himself and left it untouched on the table. Catelyn declined hers. The servants withdrew to the wall, where they became nearly part of the stone. For a moment, neither of them sat. The long oak table between them held maps, sealed papers, a single candle branch, and enough empty space for war to imagine itself civilized. At length, Tywin gestured. "Please." She took the offered seat because refusing would have made the refusal the subject. Better to make the letter the subject. "I did not expect you in person," he said once they were both seated. "Nor I your grandson's justice in person," Catelyn replied. The answer landed. Not hard enough to wound, perhaps, but hard enough to remind. Tywin's gaze did not shift. "Then we both begin from disappointment. My husband is dead." Yes. No apology. She had not expected one. Still, something in the ease of the word kindled anger in her chest. He was promised the wall. Tywin folded his hands. Joffrey's impulses are not always governed by wisdom. Wisdom did not hold the sword. No. He studied her face as if looking for what grief had made there. But wisdom may yet determine what follows the stroke. There it was. Not regret, not guilt. Merely acknowledgement that the killing had been a poor investment. Catelyn almost preferred open malice. At least malice announced itself honestly. "My son sent me," she said. "I inferred as much." Tywin's eyes dropped briefly to her sleeve, where the letter rested hidden, and then returned to her face. "Does he send me terms as king?" "He sends you terms as Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell, called king in the north by the acclamation of his bannermen." The slightest lift of a brow. A careful phrasing. "My son has learned care." "I see that." She drew the letter out and laid it between them. The seals gleamed dully in the firelight. Direwolf and trout, red wax gone almost black in shadow. Tywin did not take it at once. "Before I read," he said, "tell me why he believes I should." "Because you are not a fool. Because Jaime lives and you know what that means. Because the realm is splitting like rotten timber and every man with sense is searching for something sound to brace against. Because if you were governed by the same vanity as the boy in King's Landing, you would not be here in black wool asking questions before breaking seals." Catelyn chose a smaller truth and therefore a more dangerous one. "Because your son lives," she said, "and my daughter does." Something very still entered the room. The servants at the wall might have been carved. Tywin reached for the letter then, broke the seals with one thumbnail, and unfolded the parchment. His eyes moved over the lines quickly, without visible pause. Catelyn watched him read. It was like watching a door consider whether to open. When he finished, he set the letter down and smoothed one finger along the fold. "Your son writes with a firmer hand than many older men," he said. "He wrote with purpose. He threatens. He reminds. He demands cessation of raids in the Riverlands. He requires proof that you command the men who carry your banners." Tywin looked up. "You assume I do not." "I assume nothing," Catelyn said. "I have ridden through your work." For the first time, something like irritation flickered in those pale green eyes. "War is not clean. No. Duh. Yet some men muddy it with enthusiasm. Me." He allowed that blow to pass, though not without marking where it fell. "He offers no fealty. My son offers no lies. And yet he offers restraint. He offers sense. Sense from a newly made king is rarer than lies from an old lord. Then, perhaps you should not waste it." Tywin leaned back in his chair. The firelight found the edge of his cheekbone and left the rest of his face half in shadow. "You speak as if our interests align. For the moment they do. How convenient. How obvious." The words came more quickly now, the way they did when both swordsmen had discovered the other could parry. Catelyn felt her heartbeat in her throat but kept her voice level. Tywin Lannister would smell fear and use it if she gave him the chance. "You have Jaime in chains," he said. "You hold that before me as if it were equal to the girl in King's Landing." "My daughter is not an equal coin," Catelyn said, anger sharpening her voice despite herself. "She is worth more than your son to me, and if the gods are just, more than any 10,000 men to the realm. But I know what this war counts, Lord Lannister. Jaime is your heir in all but name and your blood in every way that matters. Sansa is a hostage whose father your king murdered. Each side holds what the other cannot easily disregard." A pause. Then, "My king." She met the correction without blinking. "The boy who ordered Ned's head cut off before the sept may sit your throne. He does not sit my conscience." Tywin's mouth hardened by a degree. "You may dislike Joffrey. Dislike does not alter law." Law. She almost laughed. "You speak to the widow of the man law could not save." His fingers tapped once against the wood. "Sentiment does not alter power." "No," she said, "which is why I am here." He considered that. Outside, some great distant gate boomed. The sound rolled through the stones and faded. "At present," Tywin said, "your son sits at Riverrun with a captive and a title shouted onto him by men drunk on grief. He has won a battle. He has not won a realm." "At present," Catelyn replied, "you sit in a burned castle with your son captive, your grandson disobeyed by half the kingdom, and 2 Baratheons sharpening claims behind you. You have not won one either." The servants did not move, yet she could feel the room listen. Tywin's gaze rested on her a moment longer than courtesy required. Then, unexpectedly, He gave the smallest inclination of his head. Not agreement, but acknowledgement that the thrust had been true. "At least," he said, "your son was honest enough to send someone capable of speaking for him. He is capable of speaking for himself. I do not doubt it. I doubt only whether he yet understands how seldom words and swords desire the same end. He understands more than you assume. He kept Jaime alive. That tells me he understands something. Enough, perhaps, to know that a dead son may be avenged, but a living one may guide a father into reason." Tywin's eyes cooled. "Be careful, my lady. I might decide you overestimate your leverage. You might. And I might decide you overestimate your freedom." "No, neither of them looked away. At last Tywin reached for the untouched wine and turned the cup once between his fingers. "Let us speak plainly. Your son cannot have Sansa restored simply because he asks it. To surrender a hostage while he remains in arms and newly crowned would be weakness visible to every rival in the realm. He remains in arms because Joffrey murdered his father. He remains in arms because the North has discovered ambition and wrapped it in mourning. Perhaps." Catelyn did not pretend outrage. "Tywin would trust her less for easy virtue. And perhaps your house has discovered that terror is easier to wield than loyalty and calls that rule." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth and vanished. "You were born to a stronger father than your husband's court deserved. My husband deserved better than your court gave." For one heartbeat the room altered. Not softened, sharpened. Tywin looked at her then not as a woman to be endured or a messenger to be weighed, but as the widow of a man whose death had changed the board enough to force this meeting. Whatever he had thought of Ned in life, he knew now what use a better ending might have had. Joffrey was rash, he said. It was the nearest thing to concession he would offer, and even that seemed to pain him. Catelyn held it in silence a moment before answering. "Rash men with power leave widows to bargain for the lives they do not understand." Tywin set the cup down. "Very well. Here's what I understand. The realm is unstable. Jaime must be returned. Sansa is an asset, but one whose value increases if not abused. Your son wishes a cessation of raiding to prove I govern my banners. I wish proof that Jaime is treated as a hostage worth recovering, not a trophy displayed before drunken lords. If I entertain further correspondence, what assurance have I that your son can restrain the men who named him king last night?" "Nani, I go, Pyke." It had happened then. His spies were as good as rumor claimed. "The assurance," Catelyn said, "is that he has restrained them already. Jaime lives, that is proof enough. For now, for as long as my daughter does." Tywin's expression revealed nothing, yet Catelyn sensed she had reached the true table now, the one under the visible one where decisions were actually placed. "What he seeks," Tywin said, "is not alliance." "Not yet." The words escaped before she could weigh whether saying them was wisdom or folly. But once spoken, they could not be gathered up, so she let them stand. Tywin's eyes narrowed the slightest fraction. "Yet, the realm is tearing itself apart," she said. "You know that. So does my son. He will never love your house. He will never forgive my lord husband's murder. But he is not blind enough to spend the North forever in river mud, while other men claim profit from the carnage. If there is a path by which these lands cease burning, and our children cease being counters on other men's tables, he will look at it." "Nanae." Tywin was silent. The wind moved through some distant broken window high in Harrenhal and sighed down the chimney like breath across old bones. At last he picked up the letter again, folded it with precise fingers, and slid it back across the table. "Tell your son," he said, "that I have read his arithmetic." Catelyn did not reach for the parchment yet. And that numbers may be discussed if he remembers that titles impress the grieving more than they do me. It was not acceptance. It was not refusal. It was worse and better than either. A door opened the width of a knife. "He asks for raiding to cease." Tywin's gaze hardened. He asks much for a boy with one battle and my son in irons. He asked enough to know whether this talk is anything more than pride dressed for dinner. A long pause followed. Then Tywin said, "For 10 days, no banner under my direct command will put a village to the torch between Harrenhal and the Red Fork, unless met with armed resistance. Does that satisfy his need for symbols?" Catelyn kept her surprise hidden with effort. It was less than justice, and more than she had expected. A test, of course. Everything with Tywin Lannister was a test. It will satisfy his need to know you can command obedience. Good. In return, I want a letter written in Jaime's own hand, confirming his welfare, and I want it by Raven within 3 days. You shall have it. And Lady Sansa remains unharmed. The phrasing mattered. Remains. Not released. Not yet. Catelyn inclined her head once. It felt like swallowing iron. Then we understand one another as far as present necessity permits. Tywin rose. So did she. Necessity, he said, is the most reliable diplomat in the world. No, Catelyn said. Only the least sentimental. That drew the faintest actual smile from him, if smile it could be called. See? Your son chose the correct envoy. No, he signaled. The servants came away from the wall, alive again after their long stillness. At the door, Catelyn paused and looked back. Tywin had already turned toward the maps, toward candles guttering over rivers and roads, and carved pieces that stood for men who would bleed when he moved them. Yet he was not looking at the lion token of his own house. He was looking at the narrow gap between two forces that until yesterday had sought only to cut each other to ruin. When she stepped into the corridor, the air felt colder than before. Perhaps that was only Harrenhal. Perhaps it was the knowledge that nothing like peace had been made in that chamber, and yet something almost as perilous had begun. Far away, north beyond rivers and rain and towers blackened by old dragonfire, a boy men had named King stood among his captains and waited to hear whether the lion had answered the wolf with teeth or with counting. Catelyn knew now it had been counting. In some ways, that was the more dangerous reply. Teeth were honest. Numbers endured. Still, when she reached her chamber and at last allowed herself to sit, she found her hands trembling, not with fear, but with the strain of hope, denied the dignity of becoming hope. 10 days without fresh torches on the road. A letter from Jaime to prove him living. Sansa not yet freed, yet named as a hostage worth preserving. Terms not agreed, yet not rejected. The war had not ended. It had only, for the first time since Ned's death, remembered that men could choose where to place the blade before drawing blood.